I'm Corinne. I'm Kaitlyn.
And I'm Jaydon, and welcome to the Coral Reef.
The location of coral reefs are found in majority of the world's oceans. Coral reefs have the most diversity in the Pacific and Indian Ocean. Coral reefs are very abundant in dovers in shallow tropical waters. Also, coral reefs are found in more than 100 countries around the world. Most reefs are located between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn and the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, Caribbean Sea, Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. The Tropics of Cancer is west of the equator towards South America. The Tropics of Capricorn is north of the equator towards North America. The temperature range of the coral reefs has to be in warm tropical water in order to flourish. The coral reefs are sensitive to temperatures below about 18 to 20 degrees Celsius or 76 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature of the reefs reach below 76 degrees, it will not grow or they will die depending on which form of coral reef it is. Some reefs do not have to maintain a certain temperature because over time they have developed an adaptation to a variety of temperatures, such as the deep coral reefs, which do not receive light. The depth of the coral reefs require light, which is related to depth. Without light, coral reefs will not grow or reproduce. The depth of coral reefs are critical. Coral reefs will not develop in areas deeper than 50 to 70 meters. Despite how important coral reefs are to life in the ocean, all of them in the world add up to less than 1% of the seafloor, and that is about an area size of France. They stay in one place and get some of their energy from the sun.
The type of water. In order for plant and animal life to flourish, the temperature of the water must be between 64 degrees Celsius and 104 degrees Celsius. While the plants may survive in the extremes of this range, the optimal temperature for the plants to thrive is 73 degrees Celsius to 84 degrees Celsius. Coral reefs are typically found in saltwater, but can also be found in freshwater areas. Salinity is measured by the electrical current the water can conduct. The more salt in the water, the more conductive the water is. Coral reefs exist in water that has a salinity of 32 to 42 parts per thousand, which is average for seawater. The water around coral reefs must be relatively clear in order for plants and animals to survive. Plants require sunlight to conduct photosynthesis and produce the nutrients they need to survive. Without sunlight, the plants could not live, which would cause the death of some animals who rely on these plants for food. Plant types. The coral reef is home to many diverse plant types. Plants are considered any life form that use photosynthesis to survive. Coral reef plants can be divided into two categories: flowering plants and algae. Many flowering plants are a part of coral reefs. There are two main types of flowering plants. Seagrasses, which are generally found in shallow, sheltered areas, form large meadows that serve for many purposes, including nursing and feeding areas for young fish, breeding grounds, and sheltered areas. Seagrass also provides habitats for many invertebrates, including sponges, mollusks, and echinoderms. Some meadows can take as short as a couple months to grow to full capacity, while others require hundreds of years to grow. The meadows are connected by a complex system of roots known as the rhizome root system. Mangroves look like shrubs with large, long roots. They grow together in forests typically. This kind of shrub tolerates and thrives in direct immersion in water due to their salt-filtering roots and salt-excreting leaves. The roots of the mangroves form a prop root system, which serves many purposes in the coral reef. The system helps young fish survive by providing shelter, allowing algae to grow, and serving as a nursery for fish. Mangroves in general add important nutrients to the water and ecosystem and help build shorelines and even islands with their strong roots. However, they are not necessary for coral reef growth. Algae. Algae is common to most water biomes, but especially important to coral reefs. Although it was once classified with flowering plants, algae is now considered its very own, very diverse division. Macroscopic reef algae is the algae that is relatively large in size and can be seen without a microscope. There are 3 types of macroscopic algae: green algae, red algae, or brown algae. Green algae grows mainly in shallow reef areas where rocks and sand substrates are available to attach to and grow on. Some different types are sea lettuce, pictured below, sea grapes, and halimata. Red algae can be found in very shallow to very deep areas of the coral reef. Its specialized pigments allow it to capture any quantity of sunlight available, which is why it can survive in deep water. The most abundant type of red algae is called crustose coralline algae. It is similar to coral and aids in the formation of coral reefs. Brown algae, the final type of algae, is very different from the other 2 types. It grows best in depths of 30 to 70 feet, although some have adapted to grow in shallow areas. Microscopic reef algae is algae that cannot be seen without a microscope, which means it is very small. There are 2 types of microscopic reef algae. Zooanguillae live in tissues in coral. They exist in hosts where many of them live at a time. They provide the host with important nutrients in return for protection from predators and nutrients that can only be provided by the coral. Benthic diatoms are the second kind of microscopic reef algae. This type of algae is unicellular. They have shells for protection and cover seagrass, seaweeds, mangrove roots, and sand. Benthic diatoms provide much of the primary production in coral reefs.
Millions of species use the coral reef as a natural habitat and is dubbed as the tropical rainforest of the sea. Approximately 9 million marine species make themselves home to the coral reef. Coral itself is its own species and begin as polyps. These polyps divide after attaching to a rock, and the colony of polyps connect to another one, forming a single organism that is the coral. However, coral reefs cover less than 1/10 of the surface of all oceans across the world. There are 2 subdivisions of animals in the coral reef: invertebrates and vertebrates. Invertebrates, or animals that lack a backbone, account for 98% of organisms on the planet. Many invertebrates utilize hydrostatic pressure, an exoskeleton, shells, or even glass spicules as support rather than a backbone. Invertebrates account for sponges, echinoderms, which are bottom-dwelling animals such as starfish, sea cucumbers, and urchins, mollusks like octopus, cuttlefish, and squid, crustaceans, polychaetes such as fireworms, bristleworms, and tubeworms, and Cnidaria, which are jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones. Vertebrates are animals whose structure depend on a backbone. According to the number of species, fish are actually the largest vertebrate group, outnumbering all the other groups together according to the number of species. Marine vertebrates that are located within the coral reefs are fishes, dugongs and manatees, rays, sea turtles, and sharks. Sea snakes and eels are also commonly found animals within the coral reef. Adaptations. Many fish take advantage of their colorations in order to blend in with the plants and other animals around them. An example of an adaptation can be seen from the coral itself. Some small corals produce toxins that allow them to fend off against predators and other species of coral. Between the coral, seagrasses offer nutrients to the coral that is not capable of receiving on its own. A very familiar adaptation is expressed in squids, octopus, and cuttlefish. These types of animals contain color-changing cells called chromatophores that allow these creatures to change colors and blend in with their environments.
Evolution. Coral reefs began to form when free-swimming coral attached to submerged rocks or other hard surfaces along the edges of islands or continents. As the corals grow and expand, reefs take on one of 3 major structures: fringing, barrier, or atolls. Fringing reefs, which are the most common, project seaward directly from the shore, forming borders along the shoreline and surrounding islands. Barrier reefs also border shorelines but at a greater distance. They are separated from their adjacent landmass by a lagoon of open, often deep water. If a fringing reef forms around a volcanic island that subsides completely below sea level while the coral continues to grow upward in atoll forms. Atolls are usually circular or oval with a central lagoon. Parts of the reef platform may emerge as one or more islands, and gaps in the reef provide access to the central lagoon. Human interaction. When it comes to human interaction, the population usually has a negative impact on coral reefs. Coral reefs that are in close proximity to human population are often subject to poorer water quality from land and marine-based sources. In fact, practices such as cyanide fishing and dynamite fishing have turned vibrant coral reef colonies into reefs containing very little life. Divers and diving near coral reefs also generally threaten the life and health of the coral in the reef. The bubbles that escape from breathing masks get trapped in caves and overhangs on the reef and can kill delicate sea life. Conservation. The reef solution. A lack of nutrients in the reefs cause contaminants to be a huge problem. Algae can often take care of small quantities of this problem. Even with large quantities of contaminants, coral can still function due to reproduction. Fragments that are healthy can often break off and start their life cycle over. Because of this, coral reefs often take a long time to have correlation again. Conservation, what you can do. In order to conserve coral reefs, you can reduce land-based source of pollution from agricultural runoffs, sewage outflow, erosion, and unsustainable harvests. You can also increase the management effectiveness of marine protected areas through management training and community engagement. At home, you could use water wisely. When you use less water, less runoff and wastewater will end up in the ocean. Also, you could support and donate money to local conservation groups.